Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. How is everyone? Good. Because you're following the two rules, of which all other rules are the servants. First one is ARC, always remember Krishna. And the other one is never forget Krishna. Life is a yajna. For the human being, the human being can make every day and every activity a yajna. In the Gita, Krishna says, Yat koroshi yarashnashi yat johosi dadasi yat tapasyasi konteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, as well as whatever austerity you perform, do it as a sacrifice for me. And also in the 8th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna that even his fighting on the battlefield is a kind of devotional service because Krishna wants him to do it. And he says, you should do that fighting, and which is Arjuna's occupation anyway, and at the same time you should remember me, Krishna says. And Srila Prabhupada comments, there's a little too much gain, I think, on this. And then Srila Prabhupada comments in the purport that if one goes on chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and doing one's work at the same time, then one can remember Krishna throughout this lifetime. What's more, material life comes with its own set of complexities. True or false? True? Okay. An emphatic true from the front row. And it is in dealing with these complexities in a Krishna-conscious manner that allows one to become mature in one's realization in Krishna consciousness. Vidyam chayas tadvedo bayam saha avidyaya ratum tirtva vidyayam ratum ashrute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality, says the Sri Upanishad. Isn't it nice that the Shastra speaks right to us? Speaking to us. A voice of transcendence, a voice of reason, a comforting voice, a voice that guides us and gives us these instruction and encouragement to go on practicing Krishna consciousness, the yajna. In the material world, there's an energy that tends to drain us, and we need encouragement at every step. So the sadhana, the practice of chanting Hare Krishna and going on with one's work, because what else can you do? We don't have really a choice. As Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, you really don't have a choice to stop fighting, because compelled by your own nature, you'll come back and you'll work all the same, because we're moved along by the three modes of material nature. However, throughout this lifetime, one can transform one's consciousness by employing the senses in the activities of sadhana bhakti, beginning with hearing and chanting, and dedicating one's work to Krishna, and engaging one's active senses in all kinds of services to help to serve Krishna. And especially practical is the spreading of the Sankirtan movement. There are lots of services to do that. So first, if from the booth we could have, maybe you could go on Google and pick up the definition for tar baby. Everybody who knows what a tar baby is, please raise your hand. Okay, one person. Tar baby. Yes, that's right. That's T-A-R-B-A-B-Y. Tar baby. Everyone say tar baby. This material world is a tar baby. What is the material world? Is it a tar baby? Does anybody know what it means? Okay, here's what it means. Can you get that text any larger? Tar baby is a fictional... Go to Wikipedia. I like the definition on Wikipedia better. There you go. The tar baby is a fictional character in the second of the Uncle Remus stories published in 1881. It is a doll made of tar and turpentine used to entrap Brer Rabbit. You all don't know who Brer Rabbit is, except for Jada Thakur, do you? You know Brer Rabbit? Okay. Don't throw me in the briar patch. The more that Brer Rabbit fights the tar baby, the more entangled he becomes. In modern usage, tar baby refers to any sticky situation that is only aggravated by additional involvement in it. So I'll say the last part and you please repeat. In modern usage, tar baby refers to any sticky situation that is only aggravated by additional involvement in it. In modern usage, tar baby refers to any sticky situation that is only aggravated by additional involvement in it. In modern usage, tar baby refers to any sticky situation that is only aggravated by additional involvement in it. Now let's consider this for a moment in relationship to the material world. There's a way in which the more one becomes involved in the material world, trying to adjust the situation, the more one becomes entangled. And even you're trying to even out the situation materially. As you do so, you become more and you become more involved in it, and you simply become more stuck. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yam hina vyatayante te purusham purusharshabha samaduka sukham dhiram somritatvaya kalpate. Somritatvaya kalpate. Could you please look up that verse? Yam hina vyatayante te. This is one of the most important verses in the Bhagavad Gita, and it tells you how to deal with the tar baby. And while he's looking for this verse, Yam hina vyatayante te, which is number 8, something like that. While he's looking it up, I'd like you to mention anything you realize just by the definition of the tar baby in relationship with this material world. Hansapriya, let's get her a microphone.
Hare Krishna. So I just, 2 years back or a year and a half ago, I purchased another property thinking I can retire peacefully and planning out. I wanted to, go through hardship and planning. And I thought, okay, good. Now I'm all in. I purchased the property. Next thing I know that I'm slammed by the lawsuit and I'm slammed by the lawyers and the debts, and it just got more entangled. I mean, I don't even see any peaceful situation in this.
Yeah. Arjuna similarly said, my mind is reeling. my mouth is drying up, and so forth. And he was thinking that there was a way in which that the whole thing could be resolved. He can walk away, and it seemed like an intractable, and it was an intractable situation. Any other realizations of tar baby? According to the definition we just heard?
This is a comment. Are you saying that this entire material universe is a tar baby?
What do you think? I'm just giving you the definition. I'm staying out of it. I'm asking if, according to the definition we heard, that it's a sticky situation. Are there sticky situations in this world? Sticky situation means that it doesn't look good, either choice you make. That's sticky. You make a choice on this side, it seems bad. You make a choice on the other side, it seems equally bad. It's very difficult Has that ever happened to anybody? Two choices, equally poor? Poor result? That's kind of sticky. And then the more involved one becomes in trying to resolve a lot of these situations, not that one can't try to come to some resolution. In other words, one has to go through the motions in this world. If you get sick, you have to take medicine. If your child needs help, you have to try to help the child and so forth. But there's a way in which if I become invested in the idea that by my involvement and my adjustments, I'm going to make things much better, then I'll be disappointed. And there is a way in which even sometimes people become involved in sticky situations and they try to work their way out of it earnestly, but then they become more entangled because of it. What else did you hear? Yes.
It just reminded me of Prahlad Maharaj's verse in Bhagavatam, Dukkaushadham tadapi dukkham. The more we try to find solution to the problem, the solution itself becomes more problematic.
That's a nice point. Yeah, Prahlad Maharaj points this out, that the solution becomes worse than the original problem. And it makes it worse even. That fits the definition of the tar baby. Yeah, anything else?
Life as a whole, I mean, we just grow up, we work hard, thinking that we'll just settle down in life, we'll get a good job, then it's happiness. Then you grow up, you get married, then you think to work on the relationships, then you have kids, now you've planned for their future, their college, so it just gets entangled more and more. In work also, you feel that, okay, you have some work, you finished off, go home, and come back, next day it's more work. So it just entangles every day.
Isn't it though? Yeah. Nice description of the overall experience of going through the various phases of life in which it seems as if I'll come to the end of it. And there is sort of the proverbial carrot on the stick. Because I heard Prabhupada once mention, and it was interesting, he said that the psychology, people will work very hard with the idea that I'll amass enough money and then I can just retire and not have to work. And there's sort of that idea, perhaps, in some parts of the world that might be possible. I say some parts of the world because I have a sense in other parts of the world where people are resigned to the fact that they're going to just work hard the rest of their life with no prospect of improvement. Sometimes they seem more peaceful because they have an idea that this is my lot in life, and therefore they just take it. When there's this idea of the American dream and actually coming to the end of it all, so I'll be the enjoyer and I'll be able to become free, our own way of adjusting the material energy tends to become more entangling. That's the point of the tar baby. And so better to take the formula in which we work minimally. We work in order to maintain the body and soul together. This is the prescription. And of course, everyone has a different quota. It's not that everyone has to live at a poverty level. That's never suggested in the Shastra. Everyone has to fulfill their physio-psychological nature in order to be happy. You shouldn't take more than you need or less than you need. But there's a certain minimum that each person can handle, and without becoming overheated and trying to get more and more and trying to readjust the material energy in such a way that all become the supreme enjoyer here. Accepting that the world comes with its grave complexities, and taking the situation that one has at hand and the facilities that have been given by Krishna, and using those to the best of one's ability to balance one's material and spiritual life and to go on cultivating Krishna consciousness is the best answer. Do you agree?
Yes.
Two people agree. Okay, let's see this verse, because this verse is a balm, it's a salve that helps to calm down the eager voice inside that says, no, if I just work a little bit harder with the tar baby, I'll get ahead and I'll solve all my problems. And here's what Krishna gives us this simple verse in order to calm down the passions so that we can actually settle in to an ecstatic life of dedication to Krishna consciousness. All say, please repeat. Yam hina vyatayante te purusham purusharshabha samatuka sukham dhiram somritatvaya kalpate. Word for word. Yam, one to whom? He, certainly. Na, never. Vyatayanti, are distressing. Ete, all these. Purusham, to a person. Purusha Rishabha, O best among men. Sama, unaltered. Dukkha, in distress. Sukham, and happiness. Dhiram, patient. Saha, he. Amritatvaya, for liberation. Kalpate, is considered eligible. Could we have the definition of eligible, please, where it comes from? It's interesting, eligibility. This word adhikari also means eligibility. And kalpate, we hear that one becomes eligible. And what do you become eligible for? Amritatvaya, for liberation. What is the eligibility to get into Cisco? What do you need? You need a degree?
Degree.
These days you can't be a college dropout and get into Cisco. What else do you need to get into Cisco?
Experience in the field. They're looking
Experience in the field? Okay. And what about, I mean, there's a lot of places you need eligibility to get in, right? Work permit? Yeah, you got to get a work permit. Okay, Shraddha, tell us what the word eligibility means, or eligible means, and where it comes from.
Eligible is an adjective, fit or proper to be chosen, worthy of choice, desirable. Synonyms are suitable and fitting. And second meaning is meeting the stipulated requirements as to participate, compete, or work.
So you want to participate in the spiritual world. Yeah. This is what you got to have. And where's the word come from?
It comes from Middle French and Latin. In Latin, eligibilis means equivalent to Latin. Ligi means select, and bliss means plus bilis means to see.
Select plus C?
Select plus C. No. Bilis, it says C-I Belia. I'll have to go there to see. So IBL is actually a variant of able. So select able to be selected.
Able to be selected. So we want to be selected, right? For liberation. I mean, Cisco's one thing. You did work hard to get into Cisco because a degree is not easy. First you got to do high school. Then you got to do college, special work, training for writing code and all that kind of stuff. Then you have to plump up your resume a little bit. And then you have to go submit yourself. It's not easy getting in, is it? Well, maybe it was for you. So one has to be selectable. How to make oneself selectable for Krishna and for liberation. And here's the verse that tells. Let's see the translation. Let's reveal the translation now. Here's the formula. I'll say, please repeat. O best among men, Arjuna. O best among men. The person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. O best among men, Arjuna. The person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for Cisco. No, not for Cisco, for liberation. Correct. Okay, now let's talk about this a little bit. What does it mean to be disturbed by happiness and distress? Let's hear some examples of how one can become disturbed. It's interesting, be disturbed by distress, but how about being disturbed by happiness? What do we mean by that? Mukharvin's ready with the answer. Let's hear it.
Suppose someone gets that lottery, I don't know, what is the 1 million here?
There's a lottery available now?
Yeah, I heard from you only, Maharaj. You told that sometimes people get and then they can't manage that and all kind of...
Yeah, most people can't. And it turns out they were happier before they won the money. Because what happens psychologically is many people, relatives they'd never heard of, and friends they had renounced many years ago, suddenly come back into their lives. And they can't tell anymore who is actually their friend and who just wants something from them. Jadu's got more about that. Here comes. Yeah, you need a mic.
People generally think of the word disturbed as not necessarily a good thing, but really disturbed is more or less the opposite of calm. And just by stirring up the water, by dropping a pebble into the water, you've disturbed the water. It's not good or bad either way. The fact is I'm no longer calm. And I certainly can understand being disturbed by happiness, because I was disturbed by happiness all the way from Hillsdale on the train coming down here.
Well, you were happy. That was kind of like spiritual happiness, though, right? It may be on a different level, because the expectation that I'll find some position in the material world in which I'll be satisfied. Interesting, the word disturbed, because it's disturbed. I wonder if you can just be turbed. What does it mean, Shraddha?
Disturb means to interrupt the quiet, rest, peace, or order of. It also means unsettled.
Unsettled.
And also to interfere with, hinder, interrupt. To interfere with the arrangement, order, or harmony of something. Disarrange. To perplex or to trouble. And the origin is Latin turba, which means tumult.
Latin what?
Turba, T-U-R-B-A.
T-U-R-B-A? Turba.
Turba for tumult. Like tumultuous, yeah, like that. Also turbere, which
turbulence.
Means, yeah, yes. And turbere, which means disturb.
Disturb.
Disturbere, and Old French also, disturber, which means, and in Middle English it comes from disturb. Like that, disturb. All that combined leads to Middle English, disturbed.
Okay. Yeah, the lottery was a good example. There's a conception that if I just win money, then my life would be okay. There have been people who research lottery winners and find out that they're miserable afterwards. Many of them suicidal. It ruins their life in many ways. What else? Disturbance. Yes, Hari Sankirtan.
Also, like when generally in the material world, we always want to grow in the career. Like we want to become manager, senior manager, CEO. But as we grow, the responsibilities grow, our family lives suffer. For spiritual practitioners, they are in a dilemma how to practice, how not to practice. Like there are so many distractions, and that disturbs our life, which we are leading much more simpler when we were like at a middle or lower position.
So is that like the pursuit of happiness?
Yeah, because we think that the more we grow, the more money we will get, the more happiness, the more position I have, the better position I have in society, people will respect me. So I will be more happy because I am getting like recognition and all those things, right? So we think that is happiness.
And it doesn't always work out?
No.
No? Okay. Yes.
I had a similar point. I feel that disturbance is a continuous situation also, where if there is hope for more and more happiness, like Prabhu was mentioning, then that disturbs and disturbs us from progressing
Interesting.
in spiritual life.
This is a nice point. This again, and Prahlad Maharaj makes this point to his classmates, where he said, the moment one begins to make plans for material happiness, at that very moment, one becomes disturbed. One feels unhappy. It's the beginning of unhappiness, is when I planned for material happiness. And there is a way in which one can be happy without planning for material happiness. This definition of happiness and distress really pertains to happiness and distress in relationship to the mind, because the mind is the center of the body. And the happiness and distress is an idea. It's an idea within the mind, because one person's happiness is another person's distress. One person, a couple buys their dream house, and they're happy, and then they become enemies. That happens sometimes too. The lovers then become enemies later. And then they decide to sell the house because they're discouraged, disgusted, and they're breaking up and going different directions. Then someone else comes along and buys the house and thinks, this is my dream house. And constantly, material items are being recycled, and they're perceived by various people in various ways because of their perspective as being the cause of happiness or the cause of distress. But they're neither. Actually, it's called manudharma. It's the function of the mind to interpret and say this is for happiness or distress. Narada Muni gives us a very calming verse in this regard, in which he says that happiness and distress on the material level are predestined. They come of their own accord according to the karma from a previous, like momentum. There's already momentum, and you're going to get an allotment. Just as you get an allotment of suffering without asking for it, he says, similarly, you're going to get an allotment of happiness without asking for it either on the material platform. Therefore, he says, don't try so hard for either one of those. Rather, he says, there's a different kind of situation one can work hard for and actually make progress, and that's advancement in spiritual life. Any other comments about this happiness and distress? Yes. You know, it's interesting, most of you are talking about how happiness, or the pursuit of happiness, disturbs. Not many people talking about distress, because it may be so obvious that, you know, it's easy to be disturbed when something happens that seems to bring unhappiness. Yes?
One can get, if there is a possibility that the happiness is going to be, I mean, let's say if there is some provision for sense gratification, and if one knows that, he or she can get disturbed, even though actually he has not really experienced that happiness, because that possibility is there, and then he can get disturbed and not do his or her spiritual practices.
Yeah, let's go back to money again, because that seems to be an object of delight here in the material world. And there's a way in which, when sometimes, not even through the lottery, but any other way, somebody receives money, the mind may remain disturbed or become more disturbed upon receiving. First of all, there's a responsibility that comes with it that one may not have anticipated. For instance, you get money, then you have to start thinking about paying taxes on it, right? And if you don't pay the taxes on it, and then that's a source of disturbance, because someone just gave me this, and now why do I have to pay half to the government? That can disturb your mind. Then there's the idea that as soon as you get the money, the mind already spends it. You get $1 million, you think, within 3 seconds, you can already apportion all that money. Well, 300,000 is going to Stanford for my daughter, and then the other 300,000, you know, we need to fix the back patio, and they told us that it's going to cave in and ruin the whole house if we don't fix it right away, and you know, on and on. And in 3 steps, you know, you just spend the whole thing, and it's like, here's $1 million. Are you happy? Meh, it's already gone. the mind's already spent it. There is no real resting place there in the idea of getting that. Hari Sankirtan, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, you mentioned that the amount of distress or happiness that we should get is destined in the material world. So in that sense, the process that follows that, like the path we follow to get that happiness or distress is also predetermined, right? So then how do we avoid that actually?
Predetermined. Well, by regulating it, the Varnashram system gives us a clue that there are ways in which devotees, people in general, have propensities, and giving them a kind of way to work according to one's propensity. Actually, we need to be engaged. Krishna says in the Gita that people can't even be happy without work. It's not that we renounce the material world and stop working, but Krishna says, people need to work in order to be happy. You can't even maintain your body without work. So you have to work on one hand, but you have to be dispassionate about it. That's why Krishna says in the Gita that you should do your work, you can't renounce your work, but you should renounce the fruit. And that sounds counterintuitive to the quote-unquote rat race in the material world, because there's a way in which, why else would I work? What's my impetus for working hard? But that's the great secret of life, Krishna says. This is the art of work, to work in a dispassionate way and dedicate the result to Krishna. Do you have a point? Yes, go ahead. Pass the mic back, all the way to the back. There.
Yeah, sometimes certain things that we accomplish, it just does bring some happiness, but at the same time, we get the feeling of pride and ego for having achieved, and again, you want to show off, and that's also a kind of a disturbance, like you want to show off or you want to say something, okay, now I'm better than the other person or something. That can also be a distress.
That's true. It can put you into a different frame of consciousness and disturb your peace of mind. Yes?
Yeah, hi. You just talked about renouncing the fruits of actions. So this kind of fits into that, where happiness and distress are actually the fruits of our previous actions.
Nice.
So if we renounce those, then obviously we'll remain stable and calm.
Right. In the Gita, 2nd chapter near the end, Krishna gives this analogy of the ocean. And there are rivers flowing to the ocean at full speed, but the ocean doesn't change its level. So in a similar way, the verse points out, we have many kinds of desires entering to the mental system. We also have disturbing thoughts coming into the mental system. But one who's become established in Krishna consciousness notices that they're coming through. It's not that they don't come through, it's just that the devotee doesn't become attached to them and doesn't react to them. And when recently a devotee in Alacha was fairly severely injured. She injured her hand in some machinery, and she's a very advanced devotee, and one of the younger devotees had written an article. When she went over to talk to her about it, she said, "I'm in pain, but I'm not suffering." This is the devotee may be in pain because the physical pain might be there, but the suffering is not there, because the devotee is saying, "Oh, the robot was damaged, and I'm sitting within the robot, and this came to me." Also, her mentality was, Krishna gave me just a tiny token of what I deserved, but he was very kind to sort of wake me up and just give me this little token. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I also felt like happiness could be a false, security which we have. Sometimes, in my personal experience in the last 6-8 months, in my office environment, what I felt is sometimes you're connected to the very higher, up in the corporate ladder, somebody, and then you're feeling, there's a sense of security because he's there and he wants me to be in that job, and it's all good. Within a fraction of seconds, a small misstep, that person is gone.
Happens all the time.
Everything changed.
Yeah.
That level, it opens up my mind, is like, wow, this can happen in like this. And the person is not of a, he's probably number 2 or 3 level, that high up in the ladder. What happened? Because you have a security, you're feeling, well, okay, he left, now you are left stranded in this whole version. So I think happiness is also sometimes a false, confidence in that. Hey,
Good point. False confidence. There's a prayer by Prahlad Maharaj in which he says, I saw my father gain the whole universe. He had everything, but he lost it within a second. So why would I try for anything? There's no sense in it. And again, the Bhagavatam's not suggesting anything impractical, that you simply walk away from your duty. But one should have this internal perspective that my real lot in life isn't here. And this very nice point about the security, brought up in the second canto of the Bhagavatam. Deha patra kalatra deshu atmasanye satsapi tesham pramatonidhanam pashanapina pashiti. Shukadev Goswami says there's a way in which I take shelter of fallible soldiers. First he names the body, deha, and then he names the family members. I surround myself by what Prabhupada calls sometimes a band of relatives, and I think they'll protect me. Or there's, of course, all kinds of ways that I build security into my life, and I think that this will make me secure, my connections, my money, or whatever. But these things can just evaporate within a moment. Yeah, nice point. Yes?
Going back to the renunciation of results, right? You always mention that we should set goals and work towards that, whether spiritual or material. So, but when we work towards the goal, we are also attached to the results because the goal is a result. So how do we renounce the results?
You can have spiritual goals, and it's different. In order, the desire to go back home, back to Godhead, and building goals towards doing that is actually recommended. And that's why Narada Muni differentiates between working hard for material goals and working hard for spiritual goals. Don't work so hard for material goals, he says, because it's going to come automatically. You want proof? Shall I give you proof? Yes. It's so close at hand. There's a cat who lives in my backyard. That cat really likes me. Used to not like me. She just hangs out back there, because I have a nice garden. So for years, about 3 years, she's been coming to my yard and hanging there. And whenever I go back to chant japa or do gardening, she would run away. As soon as you see me, and they say, hey, I'm a friend to cats. I don't know why you're running away from me. I got nothing against cats. I like them. And then gradually, anyway, it's a long story how I became a friend, but then she became, really attached to me. So every time I come back there, she comes after me. So I kind of noticed things about her. And I left for a little while to go to India when it was still hot here. And I came back and it's cold. And, she just lives in yards and eats whatever she can get. And she doesn't have a job, no insurance. And you know what? I saw when she got back, I said, where'd you get the new coat? She's got a new coat on. Her fur, all of a sudden, when the cold weather started coming, it became really thick when the cold weather came. Same with the squirrels. They're all hanging out back there, just doing whatever they do. And suddenly, they're all bushy-tailed. All the fur comes onto there. And it just happened by Krishna's arrangement. That's the material world. It's on automatic. Om Purnam Adak Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Utachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishite. You won't starve. Krishna will feed you. He's feeding every living entity. Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Ekobahunam Yoviditati Kamam. This is liberation. To actually take shelter of Krishna and say, I'll do whatever work I have to do to previous momentum, my duty, not more, not less, but I'll do it dispassionately, and I'll become passionate about spiritual life and developing there and setting goals for that. Because the other part, if the cat gets a new coat, if the squirrel gets a new bushy tail, why should I worry about making my position in the material world secure? Don't worry about it. Krishna, Masuchaha, surrender your activities to me. When you take it to the extreme, you'll see that Madhavendra Puri, when he went and sat down at Govindakund, and he was fasting, because he didn't eat unless someone brought him something. That's an interesting way to live. Most people think that if I don't work hard, I'm going to starve. And if I don't have at least $1.5 million in the bank, I'm going to starve. My whole family's going to starve at one point. Therefore, I have to work constantly. But Madhavinda Puri, as a pure devotee, he just said, if Krishna feeds me, fine, but I'm not going to endeavor for it, and whatever comes of its own accord, I'll go on chanting Hare Krishna. So that's what he did in Vrindavan. He sat there, and Krishna came personally. And he brought him a pot of milk and said, here, take this. He said, where'd you come from? He said, I heard about you. The village lady saw you here. And he said, nobody fasts in my town. And then he gave him the milk and he disappeared. Of course, he came back later in a dream and said, you should take me out of the bushes. I'm there in my deity form. I was hidden there when the Muslims attacked the village many years ago. And now please come and get me and take care of me. It's the relationship Krishna has with his devotees. So there are many verses in the Gita where Krishna assures us, for instance, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana parupasate tesham nityabdhyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. Much is made of this, that vahamyaham means I will personally carry to. Who does he personally carry to? People who back off maintaining themselves and they only think, how am I going to maintain Krishna? How am I going to take care of Krishna's business? For those people, Krishna personally puts his hand. But if you think about it, all living entities are being maintained by the goodwill of Krishna. And this material universe actually is the abode of joy for those who see like that. It's at every moment an accommodating place. Even the suffering that comes for the devotees, they see as a reminder of their real constitutional position, and they're able to take shelter in this verse, that not be disturbed by happiness or distress, and be steady in both. Now let's talk about being steady. What does it mean to be steady in happiness and distress? What does it look like? What does it mean? Yes?
One example I remembered that I think one of the very successful team, I think some game team, they were saying that when they win the match, then they think about the next game, how they can win. And when they lose, they go and cheer up for the other person because they know that there is nothing else we can do. if we said it's better to cheer for them. And
so
like
if you lose, you just get on with preparing for the next game.
No, if you win, then you prepare for.
Oh, if you win, you prepare for the next game, and if you lose, you cheer for the other team.
Other team, because you don't have any choice. Otherwise, you can just become sad, or you can cheer for other team and.
Yeah, in the world of sports, it's always interesting too. People, they win something, and then the next moment, people ask them, "Can you do it again next year? You're going to win," and inevitably, nobody can keep that up. Was that somebody on the telephone? Okay, go ahead. Oh, thank you.
I had a counter example for that.
Yes.
Study in both. When someone is, he does very good in his exams, and someone, like he's very happy, and someone comes and gives him a gulab jamun. He's very happy, like he's about to eat it. And then his friend comes and says, you know what, you just failed in 2 papers in the exam. He's not able to enjoy the gulab jamun that he had. So, if he was steady, probably he would have taken both the things in the same way. So that's what it is.
Yeah, the mind can become disturbed, and then it's very difficult to enjoy anything. Yes.
One Indian man asked Prabhupada once that even though Arjuna heard all the philosophy, then why was he crying when his son died? So he was arguing back and forth with Prabhupada, but Prabhupada said at the end he fought, so he followed Krishna. So that is steadiness.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's a very nice point. It's not that there aren't ups and downs in the life of a pure devotee, or even the associates of Krishna in this world. Jadu, do you have your hand up? Pass it back to him. And however, there is a way in which the devotee processes whatever happens and goes on serving Krishna, despite the fact that there are ups and downs, goes on taking shelter of Krishna. Nice point. Jadu?
And then that's what I was going to talk about, is that it doesn't matter what's happening in my life. My focus is to do my sadhana, to do my daily practice, to take care of my deities, to worship, to do all those things every day, no matter what. And at first that can seem like a burden or a distraction or whatever, but the fact is that it becomes an anchor. And I'm seeing this in my own life, and I'm seeing this in the lives of friends of mine, where that sadhana is really sometimes all that's keeping this person together.
That's a really important point, and it really goes to one of the main aspects of steadiness, and that is one goes on chanting Hare Krishna, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the other aspects of one's daily sadhana, despite whatever else is happening in one's life. And this is a constant. Haridas Thakur was beaten in many marketplaces, but he refused to give up chanting Hare Krishna. And there's a way in which when one fixes on the daily sadhana, it gives the ability to deal with the ups and downs that naturally come from life in the material world. Those ups and downs are inevitable for everyone, but if you have that anchor in the daily sadhana and don't deviate from that, then your intelligence becomes fortified and you develop a higher taste. Recently I discovered an application for my phone which is called Habit List. And it's a simple application, but you just list the habits that you want to keep. And then you can designate how frequently you engage in those habits. Some of them are every day, some of them are once a week, some of them are once a month. And then you make a list of them. And then you can look at it and say, once you've completed one of the tasks, one of the habits that you perform every day, then you push the button and it marks that you've done it 4 days in a row or 140 days in a row or 365 days in a row. And there's a way in which even if you start with something very small, that's transcendental habit I'm talking about, or habits in the mode of goodness are also beneficial to keep one steady, that over time, gradually, through that consistency, one begins to have a platform on which one can actually be steady in the inevitable ups and downs of the material world, happiness and distress, not disturbed by either one of them. You actually have a place to take shelter. If you had a habit list like that on your application, in your application folder, what would you put in it for daily habits that you'd want to keep every day? Chant, japa, get up early, hearing. Anything specific in the number of japa rounds you chant? 16 minimum. Okay, so it actually helps to put the numbers down, right? If you just say, I'm going to chant every day, then your mind can say, oh, that was enough. Half a mantra is enough for today because there's other things going on. But there's shelter in this numerical strength. Prayana kale manasachalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bruvor madhye pranamavesha samyak satam param purusham upaiti divyam. In the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is talking about attaining the Supreme. He mentions that the yogis practice a lot and they develop good habits. You have to practice to develop good habits. And he says from that, at the time of death, they're able to think of Krishna. That's quite unusual because if you don't practice all the time, it's not that you can simply will to remember Krishna at the time of death. Therefore, Krishna mentions yoga balena, or the strength that you get from this yoga practice. Yoga means huge, how you're connecting with Krishna every day. You have to spend time every day in this habit of connecting Krishna through different transcendental mediums. And if you do that, then you'll have the yogic strength to connect with Krishna. And one of the ways that we're taught by our acharyas to do that is through counting. It may seem a little bit pedantic or artificial, but actually this is the system that the Goswamis use. Sankhya purvaka namagana natibi kalavasani krito. They counted everything. Sankhya, they counted it. How many times I chanted. How many beads did I say the mantra on every day? And if you have counter beads, do you all have counter beads on your bead bag? See, when I see somebody with a bead bag and beads inside but no counter beads, I think, I wonder if they're really chanting, or I wonder if how much they're chanting. I wonder if they know how much they're chanting. I made this point several times while I was traveling and distributing this little pamphlet, this little card called Be a Sage, page by page, in which we've made a chart that tells you how many pages a day you have to read to complete each one of Prabhupada's books within a designated amount of time. For instance, if you read, how many pages a day to complete the Bhagavatam in 1 year? 41. Correct. And to complete the Bhagavad Gita in 1 month? I think it's 8 pages a day. So in any case, I was saying that unless you have a clear plan to finish each one of Prabhupada's books within a designated amount of time. In other words, I should be able to ask you, when are you going to finish the Bhagavatam? And you should be able to tell me the date. So this similar way, that this is Sankhya Purvaka Namagana. This gives this kind of numerical strength, just as you'll be able to tell me, when are you going to finish your rounds? Your husband or wife might say, when are you going to finish your rounds today? How many do you have left? I have 8 left. So that means how long it's going to take you? Maybe an hour, whatever. It depends how you chant. It takes a little over 2 hours to chant your rounds. And you'll be able to say. So when you count your sadhana and you do it systematically every day, in the beginning this is called vidhi bhakti. It means regulated. You have to do it. It's like military. And you have to develop these good habits. Then you'll develop all good qualities, including patience, tolerance, steadiness, from in the beginning making a decision to go ahead and practice no matter what else happens. This is an advanced stage of devotional service called bhajana kriya, when you go for the bhajan and you do it no matter what. Do you have a point? You have the microphone, yeah.
I just wanted to share this.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to address about this word steady. For instance, we observe many of these sports events, don't we? So there is a referee who calls out saying, on your mark, get set, ready, then steady, right? So he awakens the mind of every participant in the field. So there is the goal, the mark is there for each one's track, right? Everyone has got that mark. So on your mark, get ready, and then steady, and then go. So this steadiness, like you said, for the mind has got the tendency to vacillate, right? Or move like a pendulum, go this way, that way. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Only the buddhi stills the mind. Yes, this is the way to go to Krishna. Correct?
Yes.
So that's where I think this word steadiness. So Achalam Shriyamapnoti, Shreyapnoti Nittamam, and all that. What we say is that Shreyas has to get established in the mind. So even Sri Krishna, when he says first time to Arjuna, he says, I am established in my Atma. So that establishment, as you said, so you have to go through that. The mind has to go through all these practices, namely sadhana, to do the japa, that is Nama Smarana, and then Kirtana, right? Then that, so going between Japa and Bhakti, Japa Bhaja, that's one really, the divine devotional circuit or circle, so from which the mind can never get out. Then it is easy to, it becomes a practice. It gets established that it is the center I have to follow and not to go at a tangent of this path that I am pursuing between Namasmarana and devotional singing. So when we follow that, when you take all the instruments and have the singing, that reinforces this japa, and which means steadies the mind.
You made so many good points. Hard to know how to respond, but a couple of things that I really liked that you said about the circle that keeps one's mind contained. Interesting that the japa mala is a circle. I mean, really, you're going in a circle. You go around and then you go back around again. And there's a way in which the mind thinks in linear terms often and thinks, I have to get there. Where's there? We meet people all the time on the street. And you're like, here, take a look at this, Bhagavad Gita. And they're like, I have to go. They're like, where are you going? It's like, I have to get there. I have to get somewhere else. In the mode of passion, the mind's always thinking, I got to be somewhere else right now, as fast as possible. And there's no vision that I don't have to go somewhere else, because if I become self-contained, if I look inwardly and I find out that actually there's something that I can relish within. And from the japa, calming the mind and actually practicing sitting, going in a circle. I'm going around and around and I'm chanting. It takes a while. It takes practice in order to calm the mind that wants to get back up again and start going off somewhere. There was an old saying that sometimes parents would say, don't just sit there, do something. But then I saw a book, I think it was written by a Buddhist, about meditation. It said, don't just do something, sit there. So there's a position in life in which one has to actually introspect and understand that there's something to be attained by hearing the sound and letting the mind go in the circle. It's similar with the parikram. Living at Govardhan Hill, you see people coming around and around the hill. It's like, where are you going? In a circle. Why are you going? Because it's a kind of worship. Every step one's thinking of serving Giriraj. It's an interesting way of serving the Lord by walking around Him. And your whole body has to absorb that energy. Like, I'm in the Dham, I'm walking around, but where are you going? In a circle. You come back to the same place you started, but you're not the same person when you get back, because you did the yajna. And this lifetime of practicing, of doing the Vidhi Bhakti, regulating the mind around the principles given in the scripture and regulated by the spiritual master, then one can actually begin to stand on one's own 2 feet, which means that you develop your own spiritual identity and sense of value, that this is what's really valuable. The other thing that I'm pursuing may be necessary, but it's at the time being, and I may be obligated, it may be obligatory, but it's not important ultimately. Obligatory but not important. In Mataji, all the way in back, could you pass her the microphone on the back bench? You had your hand up and I had an extended response to his good points. It's not, but the technical team's coming to help right now.
I think I got it.
There you go.
Sorry, thank you. Wanted you to, if possible, enlighten us a little more about the origin of the japa, the mantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Why not Hare Radha? I mean, what is the origin of the mantra?
Well, it's listed in the Kali Santarana Upanishad. It just says, Iti sodashakam nam kalikalma shanashanam. That it's mentioned that there's this 16-word, 32-syllable mantra, Kali Santarana Upanishad, one of the 108 Upanishads. So the mantra is listed there, and then it said specifically for Kali Yuga that it helps one overcome all the obstacles of Kali Yuga. And then it says, those who objectively study all the Vedas will see that this mantra is the essence of all the Vedas. So that's one place. And in the song of Narottam Das Thakur, it kind of sums up the transcendental nature of this mantra. He says, Golo Kera Prema Dhan Harinam Sankirtan. That this chanting of the name, especially congregationally, comes from the spiritual world. It's what devotees do there, they sing the name. It's such a nice question you ask, because it's a lifetime study. The more one studies a mantra and the origin of the mantra and what's in the mantra, the more the mind becomes interested in doing it. Yes. Oftentimes the mind, when you sit down and do the mantra, it says, let's do something else. Isn't there something on Facebook today? Or something like that. But one who becomes accomplished in the mantra begins to experience the depth of the mantra. There's Nam, Guna, Rup, Lila. Everything is complete. In other words, Krishna's features, his activities, his qualities, pastimes, everything's there within the name. So the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the essence of all the Vedas. Another verse says, Nikila Shuti Mali Ratnamala Duti Nirajita Pada Pankajanta. That if you study the Vedas, you'll see the crown jewel of all the Vedas of the Upanishads. And then the Upanishads are shining light on the secret within all the Vedas, and that is the holy name of Krishna. So there's a lot of there are a lot of very beautiful shastric statements and statements by sadhus that you can study about the holy name and therefore develop a very keen interest in it. Help focus the mind.
Thank you, that was excellent.
Oh, thank you very
Makes
much
more
for your
sense
question. It
of
was excellent. Okay, and now we have a text that's just come in from our audience. And by the way, welcome to everyone who's joined us online tonight. Everyone please say Hare Krishna and welcome them.
Hare Krishna!
Okay, but on a scale of 1 to 10, that was about a 3. And all the people that took time out of their evening tonight to tune in specifically to watch what's going on here at ISV deserve a 7.5. So let's put it up to that level. Here, this is for you, everybody at home. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Hare Krishna! That was pretty good. Okay, who's written in?
So there are two. We have our Rasaprad Prabhu.
Rasa Prada, fantastic. All the way from Florida.
And he has two comments. One is that happiness is a state of mind that can be demolished by any negative perception. And his second comment, I really like that. He says, to be steady in either situation is accepting that both are temporary and both have a solution. So I was just, wondering about the comment that there is a solution to happiness also, which is the extreme, like you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be there, you should just be steady. So that was a nice observation.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. And
you can traverse the whole universe and there will always be somewhere else to go if you don't have a specific duty to perform in Krishna's service. Just as an example, traveling recently, I just noticed everywhere I go, every city has advertisements to go somewhere else. When you get in and you to the new place and then it says, you should have been in Barcelona. It's like, hey, wait a minute, I just got to Paris. And if you go to Barcelona and you think, well, the Barcelona's the place to go, then you'll get there and you say, Greece, you got to go to Greece. In the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, there's a way in which Gopakumar traverses the entire universe. Sanatan Goswami shows how he traveled to every layer, every corner, nook and cranny of the universe, and he wasn't satisfied until he came to his real place, which was Sri Vrindavan Dham. Yes, and the other aspect, the other point, Rasa Prada?
I know those were the 2 points that he made.
Thank you,
Yeah.
very insightful.
Yes, and then we got a message from New Delhi, India.
From New Delhi, okay.
This is Mukul Prabhu. And thank you for the wonderful explanation of the verse. I have few queries. The first is, even though I hear that material work must be done dispassionately and for the pleasure of Krishna, can you kindly guide me through an example? How could one do work for money, that is to support self and family, without getting attached to it, as it sounds impractical to pursue to me?
Well, first of all, you need some money to maintain yourself, so you have some quota. In the Sri Upanishad, it is said that everyone has a quota. Tena tyaktena. It's set aside for you. Tena taktena bhunjita. You can enjoy to that degree that which is set aside as your quota. So no one's saying that you have to renounce those things which you need to sustain yourself. But at the same time, one should be situated in such a way that one can think, according to performing one's occupation, that I'm doing this for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you want specific guidance, one of the age-old instructions and recommendations is that you should give the fruit of your work to Krishna. And you may not give all of it, but you should give a portion of it, because your mind will follow the result of your work. And you can practice, if it's very difficult to give, you can start by giving what you can give, and then see how that works, because when you put money in the hundi, then when you go home, your mind will still be here in the hundi. Because your mind goes, where'd you put that anyway? Wasn't that for us? All the senses are going, weren't we going to get something out of that? And you just gave it away. Who'd you give it to? And he's like, I gave it to Krishna. So your mind's still dwelling there in that place where you gave the money. Even in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna recommends that even if you can't give to Krishna, you should give to something. Because the giving process begins opening one's consciousness and heart to the way the universe works. It's counterintuitive. I think the harder I work, the more I keep, the happier I'll get. But actually you can perceive for yourself when you give in charity, even if it's not to Krishna. If you give in charity, you feel bigger than you were before. You feel happier. And there's a sustained kind of exhilaration that one gets from doing the right thing. And then if you're able to give to Krishna through your work, then you'll feel a kind of satisfaction. And naturally, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janiyat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yarahaitukam. By doing devotional service to Krishna, there's a concomitant success in renunciation and in knowledge. It comes naturally into the mental system. I'm giving a long answer and he has more questions. What else is it?
The second question, again, it's funny that you talked about mind dwelling on things, and you also told the Mataji at the back that it's good that your mind is thinking about the mantra, because then you'll try to find the origin and all that. And so his next question is that when you were talking about how do people chant if you don't have a counter beat, his question is that how can a person chant properly if they're using that click, 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 counter?
Well, the counter is supposed to keep track for you, right? You mean those little Chinese things? Yeah, there's a counter on there. I mean, you're supposed to count in some way. Traditionally, there's beads. Aesthetically, beads are nice because they're very traditional. You see, if you go to the Gambhira in Puri, you see, here's Lord Chaitanya's beads, and Jiva Goswami had beads and so forth. And there's something very aesthetically pleasing about holding on to the beads and then saying the mantra and holding the beads. And especially if you can receive those beads from a Vaishnav who says, I bless these beads, you chant under my shelter and so forth. Something very grounding about that whole process. But if you chant on your fingers, we've taught everyone how to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you can count the multiples of 10 on this side and so forth. That's okay. And if you have a little Chinese clicker, you can buy those little things that keep track, and you keep the mantra going. Main point is to always remember Krishna, never forget him. And the main point of remembering Krishna always in this age is to continue chanting. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yujyacha. In that verse, Prabhupada recommends. I mean, it's a simple prescription. Always remember Krishna. Okay, how do I do that? Always chant Hare Krishna. Try it. And to see if you don't always remember Krishna. You can't forget him if you're always chanting Hare Krishna. Let's try it for a few minutes. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And on and on. And on and on. Damodar Prabhu, what is the name of your exalted God brother who just came in?
His Grace Keshavananda.
We'd like to welcome His Grace Keshavananda Prabhu, this great sadhu we see sitting over. Thanks for coming to visit us. Very nice to have you here. Was that it with the questions from the text? Okay. Yes, Mukaravind.
Maharaj, when you're telling that Sankhya Purvak Nam Gan, like how Goswamis have given this formula of everything counting. So today we had some career development seminar by some very senior director in our company, and then he was telling that how everything is measurable. And he was quoting that one of the very Mark Derek, that if you cannot improve or manage, if you cannot improve or manage what you cannot measure.
Yeah, you can't improve or manage what you cannot measure. Yeah, that's very practical. Apply it to spiritual life as well. Sankhya Purvaka Nama Gana Natipi. And the other thing about being steady, controlling the mind is that the solution is often very simple. The mind likes to go elsewhere to find some other kind of complicated solution. It's not good enough. There are ways in which, just thinking back, oftentimes Prabhupada would point this out because he would say the solution is simple or the process is simple, but you want to do something else or change it and make it something else. When we were in Govardhan this year, one devotee gave class and he was pointing out how the basis of anything is really simple. Even complicated machines like a computer is based on ones and zeros. It's a binary system. It's just two things, but the combinations of it make something extraordinary in the various combinations and permutations. And oftentimes we say, just chant Hare Krishna, and there's a way in which people say, well, there's no fire yajna, there's no, isn't there magic or priest or something like that? But the answer is very simple, chant Hare Krishna, and you'll come to the end, you'll come to the real juice in it very quickly, if you stick strictly to the simple process. I think Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that. Apply the simple process very strictly. Another one came? Yes, please.
This is from Vaikunt Naik Prabhu.
Vaikunt Naik, yes. Checking in from South India. Okay.
Yeah. So he's giving an example of disturbance through happiness that you'd asked earlier in the class. He says Tiger Woods couldn't handle his success.
Couldn't handle success, yeah.
And then he says there's also a cricketer in India by the name Shrikant, or Shrishant. He got overly excited on taking a wicket and got slapped by his opponent in front of thousands of people.
He got sacked? Slapped. Is that part of the game? No?
No.
Okay. I don't know cricket very much. It could be, because... All right. Yeah. Something comes along when you think you're flying high in this material world to disturb your... Yes, there's a devotee in the back with his hand up. Pass him the mic. Okay. And right after these next two, I'm going to read the purport to this verse.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It's a very neophytic question, if there is such question. What about disturbances that are not caused by your material engagements, but that are pertinent to your faith? I come from a science background, so I'm asking these questions. I'm pretty sure most people here do as well. Like, when you're doing the sadhana, but you don't know answers to certain questions that you just attribute to faith, saying, okay, fine, it's just faith, I'm going to do it. Like, for instance, like certain stuff in the Vedas or certain stuff in the history of our tradition, it's kind of hard not to be disturbed by that and still stay steady.
That's true. That's very true.
And especially it's hard for like someone who lives by science every day at work. Like, if I'm assuming most people are engineers, if not, something else. So you keep contemplating on these principles. You kind of want to know where they originate and what the scientific basis of it is. And sometimes you don't know the answer to questions because you just don't know. So how do you deal with such situations and then maintain steadfastness in sadhana?
Well, one has to hear from the Shastra in order to overcome doubts. Doubting is a function of the intelligence, as mentioned by Lord Kapila in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And if we weren't able to doubt, then we wouldn't be able to ascertain the higher truth, because doubting helps us winnow out the relative truths. For instance, there's the material world, and then Krishna says, Aparayam etastonyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam darite jagat. He distinguishes between a lower energy and a higher energy, saying there's a mixture of the two here in the material world. And as one continuously hears the science of Krishna consciousness, or I shouldn't say continuously, but regularly hears, then one's able to connect the concepts of, for instance, modern science and understanding Krishna consciousness. There is a way, even in science, if you go deeply enough within it. If you're enamored only of the external features of science, you might think we've made great advancement and so forth, which is true. The Industrial Revolution is mind-boggling in the ways in which we've developed technology and so forth. But if you go deeply within any science, you'll find that there's a limitation to how much you can actually know. First of all, everything that you learn that gets passed down to you from another teacher is basically dogma, because you can't investigate it for yourself. You have to simply accept it through a disciplic succession of teachers, scientists, other scientists who have previously come to some conclusion. But at any given science, you won't be able to penetrate the great mysteries of the science, which should give you faith in something higher, in some conception that there is an intelligence beyond simply this material nature. When I was in grammar school, I remember my first great disappointment with science when the teacher showed us a movie, which was always a great delight, because then we get to actually watch a movie in school. They bring in these projectors that would run these actual film and stuff. Kids, you'd never heard of this stuff before. And but we loved it when the projector came in, because it just meant a little bit of entertainment, even in the name of education. And there was a show about photosynthesis, which we were studying. We had to bring a leaf in and write a report about what a photosynthesis is, and then we were going to see the movie. And here's the authoritative movie written by the Science Institute and so forth. And I was watching, okay, now I'm going to find out where photosynthesis, how it actually happens. And it got to a certain part of the movie, and it was animated cartoon. And then at one point, one of the characters said, well, and they pulled this little blind down. Behind, there was a factory that was animating how the photosynthesis was taking place, but someone came and pulled the blind down so we couldn't see the characters inside. And then they said, but we don't know what happens after this. And it's like, what are you talking about? This is a science film. How can you not know what's going on behind there? But you'll find that in any science. You'll come to a point at which it's inexplicable. There's some principle beyond that. So although science is, we don't reject science, we utilize it in the service of Krishna, and there are many useful things about science. We use WhatsApp quite frequently to organize our Sankirtan party and so forth. And we sort of just take it for granted. Of course, probably you don't, because you know what it takes to make such a program. I have no idea, to be honest with you. I just use it. And when you also study the Bhagavatam and hear from those who have great faith, but can also connect the faith and fortify your own intelligence through logic and through scripture, then you can actually get your own standing in this kind of, what do we call, well-reasoned faith. It's not a kind of faith that's just based on, well, the scripture says it, therefore I believe it, and if you don't, then I'll kill you, which is prevalent in the world amongst neophytes in every religion. Doesn't matter which one it is. But there is a difference between that and well-reasoned faith. Those have actually studied the science of both, the science of the material world, which goes on in the Bhagavatam in the 5th canto. There's a way in which Parikshit Maharaj asks scientific questions. He wants to know what's the length and breadth of the universe, because he wants to point out the unlimited nature of this very universe. And Shukadev Goswami very scientifically answers him, but also warns him. He gives the caveat that I won't be able to satisfy your inquiry completely because nobody can. This universe is unlimited in its length and breadth, and if you go into the minutest details of molecules and atoms, you also won't be able to come to the end of it. You had a follow-up question. I can sense it.
Just because you talked about the universe, I guess my original question, I should have rephrased, is, so there are some aspects of science that you can verify. So there is this observation, there is a theory, there is an experiment, and there is a proof. And you have certain things in the Vedic literature that, for example, let's just talk about cosmology, for example. It's kind of hard not to be able to verify them and then accept them at the same time. So my question is more specific in that way, like what about those things in the Vedas that you read that you cannot verify? Do you just accept them and just move on, or how does a devotee cope with that? That's the question.
Well, yes. Basically, there's a point in doubting at which you'll be able to distinguish what it means to accept an infallible authority. If your doubting process can bring you to the point of analytically considering that there is an authority that is giving information for things that are beyond my sense perception, and you can understand that that's possible, that there is an authority that gives information of things that are beyond my sense perception, and you can lend yourself to that, then it will help you make progress. There may be an interim period in which you accept that authority, but there are still things that boggle your mind, and you can't understand how they may be true. But if you're able to some degree to suspend that disbelief by going into the realm I just talked about, which is science can't explain it either. Through sense perception, I mean, you can make more and more advanced microscopes to look into the minuteness of this world, but after all, they're created by the same imperfect people that can't see when their eyes are closed, and so forth. And in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, Prabhupada asks the reader to suspend disbelief for some time and just say, for the sake of reading this book, accept that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then read it and see how it fits. Vedic knowledge also is self-luminous. There's a way in which when you read Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, you may have a direct experience. Pratyakshavagam dharmyam. There is a way in which the self can see itself and can experience that it's spiritual. It's not that we depend on the mind and intelligence, but we can actually transcend that through the transcendental process and experience for ourselves that we exist. And how do we exist? We exist eternally. One can feel that. This is another realm of science, which you mentioned the various aspects of, in which one has a theory, I'm non-material. There is an experiment, chant japa, meditate, other types of activities which lead to the experience. And Krishna mentions many of these in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and elsewhere throughout, that you can have your own experience, and invites us to practice it. And then one gets a consistent result. And one should experience it for oneself. Bhakti parishanu bhava viraktir anyata traishatrika ekakala prapadyanmanasya yatasnatasus tushti pushti shuddha payunugasam. Bhagavatam compares it to a hungry man eating a healthy meal and feeling satisfied, nourished, and then the hunger going away. So in the similar way, when one practices direct connection with Krishna through bhakti, one can experience for oneself the satisfaction, direct perception of God, and detachment from all other things that aren't related to Him. There is also a realm that has the phrase that was coined, maybe it was Sri Dayananda Maharaj who coined it, but it's a very useful phrase called blind doubt. Sometimes religionists are accused of blind faith. Oh, that's just blind faith, that's just your belief. Well, you may also, if we analyze your situation, it's possible we could accuse you of blind doubt. Because you're confining yourself to a certain realm, which is only through investigating through what you can know through your senses. And what about another realm? Isn't there something else available through superior authority? Is there a possibility that there's an absolute truth? That there's an infallible source? No possibility. Blind doubt. How do you know that? You can't know that. Why not suspend your disbelief and take from that authority and do the experiment on yourself and see what comes out? So in a practical way, yes, there are many ways in which the advancing devotee may not be able to comprehend some of the fantastical presentations in the Vedic literature. But understand our perspective. Prabhupada used to give simple examples like the frog in the well. How ridiculous is it to want to accommodate, to circumscribe everything I can see within the universe within my own mind intelligence, as tiny as it is. The frog in the well who hitches a ride on a bullock cart and goes down and sees the Pacific Ocean down at Big Sur, and then comes all the way back to its little well right here in San Jose, and then tells his uncle, who's always lived in the well, that I just saw the biggest well in the world. I couldn't see the end of it. He said, how big is it? Twice as big? No, much bigger, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. He can't comprehend, he can't appreciate even this information being brought in from an outer source. Socrates wrote about the cave dwellers and how one who lives in a cave, his or her whole life cannot comprehend the sun. And if someone comes in from the outside world and begins to describe that there's a luminous body, it's self-luminous, it lights up the whole world, it makes plants grow, it makes life from everywhere, and then it's like, get out of here, that's ridiculous. That's heresy in the world of darkness, to bring in such a thing. And to actually introduce the sun to such a person, one may have to, he said, bring in one beam of light through the wall and let it shine on the wall. It's kind of like that. The Upanishads do that. Because they say, there's God, He's the supreme conscious, Arukrama, the great actor, He can do anything. It's like, how can I understand that? Upanishad says, look at yourself, you're God. Sometimes people think, they look at the Upanishad and say, see, I'm God. That's not what it's saying. It's saying, take a look, you're a sample of God. And there is nothing more amazing in this entire dark universe than yourself, because you're a conscious living entity and so forth. You can experiment, you can look, you can see for yourself, take guidance from the Shastra and from those who are on a platform, Madhyamadikari, Uttamadikari, where that means that they have the faith. Uttamadikari has the faith, but also Shastra Sunipana, can connect all the logical points to the Shastra and so forth and guide you. And that's in the guru-disciple relationship, there's a way in which you're supposed to put your doubts forward. That's what a guru is for. You're supposed to sit there and say, yeah, but what about this? What about that? And the guru is supposed to then take each one of them and help you put it aside to clear your path, because the doubts simply slow you down, get in your way. And when you come to a certain level, then you're unencumbered by those kinds of things. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay, good. Nice questions. Are you going to school here? Are you working here?
I'm working here.
What do you do?
I'm an engineer.
Do you write code?
No, I don't. I work with hardware.
Hardware. Very nice. Thank you. Now I would like to read the purport to this verse. It should be very suspenseful after we've discussed it to some degree, and now we can actually hear an explanation given by Srila Prabhupada. Isn't it kind of suspenseful? Doesn't it make you want to hear the purport? We ran out of time. We'll talk about it next month. That's all? You're not more disappointed than that? Oh, okay. All right, let's read it. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. I can't help it, but I'm going to read the sentence over again because it's too powerful. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. What sticks out to you in this one line? Steadiness. Steadiness. You know what got me is the onslaught thing. I mean, you never want to be in an onslaught, right? How was it? It was an onslaught. We're in an onslaught of distress and happiness. That's pretty heavy. And steadiness, determination. Okay, in the Varnashrama institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renounced order, sannyas, is a painstaking situation. But one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyas order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships, to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjuna's discharge of duties as a Kshatriya, he is advised to persevere, even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyasa at the age of 24, and his dependents, young wife as well as old mother, had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause, he took sannyas and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage. By the same token, I mean, talking about severing family relationships, taking a transcendental qualification, staying with the family and being harmonious and productive and supportive takes a similar amount of transcendental acumen. True or false? True. I didn't know your audience, you know. I'm not talking to a group of brahmacharis or sannyasis, one brahmachari here, but there's a way in which in the grihastha ashram, one can't take this kind of information and then say, oh, I won't do my duty properly because someday I'm going to renounce anyway, so therefore I'll mistreat my family and so forth. There's a way in which Prahlad Maharaj describes in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam how the austerity of the grihastha in the varnashram system is that you must be internally detached detached, but externally you must act attached. Now that's an austerity, don't you think? At least maybe not an austerity, but it requires maturity to be able to give yourself emotionally and in every other way that your family might need, and at the same time maintain this dedication to your spiritual life without wavering one way or the other, and remaining detached internally, developing that kind of internal attachment. Yes. Now, while you're getting the microphone, don't mind, I'm going to look down at this book for a second before you start, because there's a verse I wanted to read to you all, and I have to rediscover where I left off. Sorry for the delay. Please go ahead.
Maharaj, I know you've, Hare Krishna Maharaj, I know you've talked about it many times, but my capacity to retain is much lower. So I wish to hear from you again. When we first start in the process of Krishna consciousness, everything we do is new to us. So there's this defined fresh taste to everything that we do. Sometimes I think that I was happier doing 4 rounds, because I was much more happier just getting the taste. Doing 16 rounds and everything else, sometimes I'm just not happy with what I'm doing. Why is that? Is it because we want more now? Or is it because we recognize the lack of quality? Or is that one of the steps we have to overcome? The constant steadiness that you're talking about. Which one is it?
The mind is forever fickle. And whatever it takes up now, as a cherished item, later it rejects as the worst garbage. And therefore we have this vidhi bhakti where we stick to it until we can actually develop an appreciation. And yes, there may be a stage at which the process seems a little more tedious. Just as when one learns typing, and you have to constantly refer to the typing book. Nowadays it's software, and you also have to be very clear about where you put your fingers and so forth. I noticed, the beginning of anything can seem exciting, and later on, when the results don't come, the mind says, give me something else. I used to be in business of teaching people how to start their own business. I'd help people start their own businesses and get started in business and help coach them till they were successful, hopefully. And what I found was a lot of people wanted to be entrepreneurs because the prospect of being financially independent was compelling. But once they started, and they realized there was a lot of work involved. And then there was also failure was possible that you had to work through, and obstacles and so forth. I don't want to do this anymore. I was like, you don't want to do it anymore? No. And there's a way in which when we dedicate ourselves to the spiritual process, we see the prospect in the beginning and it becomes compelling, and we see the light and so forth, and then we dig in, and then there's the daily battle of the trenches that one has to go into with the mind and the senses and everything else. That is, however, a temporary period. In any practice, in business, it's like that. In learning to play an instrument, it's very true. I mean, everyone who thinks of playing an instrument, or perhaps many people, think of themselves, there I am, I'm playing the instrument, everyone's listening and then cheering afterwards and so forth. But when you actually sit down and try to figure out where to put your fingers on the keys, and it becomes an arduous practice, then, the mind might say, well, maybe I'll try another instrument. And I know, when I was growing up, there were kids that tried about 6 instruments. So what happened to your clarinet? Nah, I'll play the trombone. They move to one thing to the next. So yeah, we have to be a little wary of the interim period. And
no, I was thinking more of the taste. Like when you start fresh, you get this real high with the minimal sadhana that you're putting in. You get this real shot of adrenaline, and then you put in all the sadhana and you're pumping. Sometimes you're like,
free
where
sample.
was that high?
It's a free sample. I told this many times, but Chicago, when I did Sankirtan downtown, I remember the candy bar companies used to come out during the summer, and they would give away candy bars, but they were only little like this. But it had the logo and everything else to introduce the candy bar, and people would line up, they give out all the candy bars, and they come back, give me another one. It's like, nope. You got to go buy it now. Narada Muni, when he started, he sat down, he got an overwhelming experience. Imagine his bliss when every one of his senses was independently liberated and engaged in the service of Krishna. He was floating in an ocean of bliss, and then he was pulled back into the bodily existence. And then he tried to mechanically get it back. And then Krishna spoke to him in an unembodied voice and said, it's not mechanical. He said, you're a ku-yogi. You're trying the wrong way. You have to do this throughout your lifetime, qualified. This verse, go back to this verse. What's the qualification? Kalpate. How do you become qualified? Remain steady through happiness and distress throughout this lifetime. And it is a lifetime endeavor. About taste for the holy name, Charu, one of my godbrothers, he was in Australia. Really brilliant devotee. Super brilliant. He's in Utah. He has that project in Utah. His wife designed that temple and they built it by hand. You ever seen that? If you ever hear Charu speak, he should have been a senator or a president or something. He's the slickest speaker in the world, and he looks like a senator too. He also can make money anywhere. Bhadri Narayan Maharaj once said, if you send Charu and Vaibhavi, that's his wife, to the dark side of the moon, they'll figure out how to make a profit. Anyway, Charu, when he was a young devotee, I think he joined around 1969 in Australia. Prabhupada came there, and he had been chanting for a little while. Everybody had been chanting for a little while. And he asked Prabhupada, so Prabhupada, when do you actually get a taste? When can you actually get a really taste for the holy name? And Prabhupada thought about it about 2 minutes and he said, 40 years. so don't even ask for another 40 years. No, it's all right to ask. But, and there are a lot of answers too. There are a lot of answers. And it isn't important to check back in again. It's like, what was that again? But the taste is there. It's covered over by the mind's machinations and the various coverings of the senses. They're very subtle, and they actually rob us of that connection we have with Krishna, which is very sweet. And especially you can get from association with advanced devotees, sometimes more expediently than anything. As if you get around devotees that have taste, it's inordinate. Actually, it sort of rubs off on you. You go away thinking like, how'd that happen? Is this causeless mercy? I sat with somebody who actually had a taste for chanting. Like I have a godbrother, when he chants, I always feel like he's drinking a beverage, and I want to taste some too. I hear him chant. He sits in my house sometimes, and I sit with him sometimes in Mayapur when he's chanting, and the mantra's going on, and I'm thinking, it's like he's drinking something the way he chants, some beverage or something. It's like, I'd like to have a beverage like that too. So you can develop an interest in getting a taste. And you can always find a taste somewhere in Krishna consciousness. You may not have it in chanting. It takes some time because it's a you against the mind in the chanting of the japa. But there are other ways in which devotees develop tastes. Of washing pots. I mean, that's a way to get an instant taste. You go in and you scrub pots for Krishna. Then all of a sudden, it's like first of all, you feel spiritually noble. Unless you get puffed up and think, look, I'm so humble, I'm washing pots. But if you actually go in and do some menial service, it's like no one knows I'm in here, all of a sudden you'll start feeling like, this is nice. You know, I want to stay in here. I don't want to go back out to my job at Cisco. I want to stay in here and wash pots. And there, you know, if you go volunteer for a festival and you just go back, I'll do whatever you say. Here's a taste. You know, you go in and you say, just tell me what thing. There's a taste in that. You start developing this taste. I mean, very advanced devotees, they'll come visit and they'll say, tell me what you want me to do. They don't come in and say, look, I'm going to tell you how it is and how... They come in and they say, tell me how I can serve. Order me. They'll say like that. Order me. What do you want me to talk about? If you want me to do anything, do that. Because there's a taste in that. Jeev Krishna Das E Bishwas Kole Tora Dukhanai. Just say this thing, I'm a servant of Krishna. There's a taste in that. And there's also a taste in not having a taste. Ashlishyava Padaratam Binashtumam Adarshana Marmahatam Kurotava. There's a way in which Lord Chaitanya, I can't get anything. And when Krishna's gone, he's not even paying attention to me. It's like, but I'm not giving up. And as soon as you say that, then all of a sudden you feel this taste. It's like, I'm the person who's never going to see Krishna, but I'm never giving up. I'm the person who doesn't have any taste for chanting japa, but I'm not going to stop chanting no matter what. And then you'll feel, you know, bolstered in that determination. There's taste in that. There's taste in everything in Krishna consciousness. It's sweet on every side. And if you just lock yourself to it and go on, the rewards, I was listening to Prabhupada today and he was saying the rewards are beyond what you can expect. All the time. And in the material world, they're always below what you expect. You get it, what it was, and then you go like, that's it? I mean, Christmas time is a great example. I used to, when I was a kid, I got to have that toy. I remember I wanted this little, it had these ducks going around, and you shoot the little gun, shot these pellets, and you knock the ducks down and stuff like that. And I was dreaming about it. So I think I saw it on television. I had to have it. And I saw it in the department store downtown San Francisco. And I was like praying, and oh, if I could just get that thing. And I remember it lasted about 10 minutes. After I opened it up, it's like, aren't you going to play with that thing? Yeah, that thing. And practically everything in this world is like that except for the process of devotional service. You can read about it in the third canto, that chapter called Devotional Service by Lord Kapiladev, the process of devotional service. And it's like, here, I just happen to have a copy. I just have a few minutes left. Let me read you a few verses from this. You'll be transformed. Devahuti's lamentation, the glories of devotional service. Just a few verses for a taste. This is 25:1. Sri Shaunaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. Shaunaka continued, there is no one who knows more than the Lord himself. No one is more worshipable or more mature yogi than he. He is therefore the master of the Vedas, and to hear about him always is the actual pleasure of the senses. Therefore, please precisely describe the activities and pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is full of self-desire and who assumes all these activities by his internal potencies. Sri Sutta Goswami said, the most powerful sage Maitreya was a friend of Vyasadeva. Being encouraged and pleased by Vidura's inquiry about transcendental knowledge, Maitreya spoke as follows. Maitreya said, when Kardama left for the forest, Lord Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovara to please his mother Devahuti. When Kapila, who could show her the ultimate goal of absolute truth, was sitting leisurely before her, Devahuti remembered the words that Brahma had spoken to her, and she began to question him as follows. Devahuti said, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material desires, for because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. Your lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental eye, which by your mercy only I have attained after many, many births. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin and Supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of the ignorance of the universe. Now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel illusion, Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. David Kahuti continued, I have taken shelter of your lotus feet because you are the only person of whom to take shelter. You are the axe which can cut the tree of existence. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you, who are the greatest of all transcendentalists, and I inquire from you as to the relationship between man and woman and between matter and spirit. Maitreya said, after hearing his mother's uncontaminated desire for transcendental realization, the Lord thanked her within himself questions, and thus his face smiling, he explained the path of the transcendentalists who are interested in self-realization. The personality of Godhead answered, the yoga system which relates to the Lord and the individual soul, which is meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entity, and which causes detachment from all happiness and distress in the material world, is the highest yoga system. O most pious Mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in all ways. The stage in which the consciousness of the living entity acted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life. But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. When one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possessions as mine, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called happiness and distress. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never, although very minute in size. Last verse, but this one's going to send you away with something you'll never forget. Listen to this. In that position of self-realization, by practice of knowledge and renunciation and devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective, becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. I rest my case. So we've had a foray into one of the tiny little aspects of devotional service, and we found that it's, after all, there's an ocean. Yes, last point.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. The point you mentioned that one ray of the sunlight in the dark cave, which struck me that like when we are out on Sankirtan 3 weeks before, houses for Srimad Bhagavatam, but I think it's early afternoon, nobody opened door. So, but one door we went and she actually sells a saris in her home. And she thought we went to buy saris. And she invited home and she immediately garage where she's having all kinds of saris and showing this from South India, this is from Kanchipuram. And we told we didn't come to take your saris, but we came to distribute Srimad Bhagavatam. And she told that in 2 years before you gave me a Krishna book in Diwali Mela. So I remember you guys came for Srimad Bhagavatam. And then we told an example that in Puri Jagannath, so they do the fire sacrifice in the shop itself. They have a fire sacrifice in the shop. Like that we can do installation in your shop. And she agreed, she took Bhagavatam from.
Haribol!
Just that small ray of Krishna book which
which proves that if you become, well, if you don't become detached from samsara, you'll become attached to samsari. Haribol!
Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, hey, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman.